Hey folks, so I just got into Phoenix. I wanted to do a little preamble for episode 8. Recorded that with Dan Granger yesterday. He's the CEO of Oxford Road, and he was actually kicked out of Israel. He was there on a trip when they shut down for Corona. Got back to the U.S., never was able to go back to his office because he got quarantined 14 days. And being the CEO of his company with 40 employees, had to figure out how they were going to manage that. And then also after, the George Floyd murder and protests, how they were going to pivot and treat that differently. They're an advertising agency. So I think it's a pretty good interview, and Dan has a pretty great viewpoint. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks a lot. There we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 8, maybe 7 of Chicken Man on the Run. I don't remember. Some things have transpired since last Chicken Man, which is the murder of George Floyd and the ensuing protests. Today I'm here with Dan Granger, CEO of Oxford Road, a small business here in Los Angeles. Real quick, what's Oxford Road, Dan?
We're an advertising agency.
Okay.
We focus on audio, and we work with a lot of performance marketers, direct-to-consumer brands, helping them use these channels to get customers.
Okay, so advertising agency.
That's right, ad agency.
I have a coin here. Heads. This is a St. Jude coin, which is the patron saint of lost causes.
Okay.
Heads is going to be one topic on this piece of paper. Tails is another. We're going to talk about George Floyd and coronavirus and how both of those things have been impacting individuals and small business. So you want to call it?
Sure.
Heads
We'll
or
go
tails?
heads.
I'm a bad coin flipper. It is heads.
Okay.
All right. Heads is George Floyd.
All right. Let's go.
So, how have the George Floyd protests impacted advertising?
Well, if we're talking specifically about the protests and not the event.
Well, let's talk about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can start with the one. So the protests. It's been everything from, I had a team member who went to help a friend in downtown Los Angeles shut down their business.
Okay.
Because, some of the protests had expanded into riots, and they were there to just close up shop and try to make sure everything was going to be safe. By the time they got back home from closing up the shop, the business had been destroyed that they just tried to lock up. Yeah. And so everything from, people seeing the hardships that, some people are experiencing as a byproduct is a piece of it. And I think there's been a weight and a heaviness around all of us because I don't know anybody that saw the video and wasn't appalled, sad, sick. I think it's affected all of us in very emotional ways. But the way that we express that is coming out in all different fashions, right? And so I think the protests are hopefully a constructive way that people are getting to have a voice and participate in a broader discussion. Some of those things expand into, more detrimental things where there's collateral damage of, businesses being destroyed and things like that. But I think the protests have really, if nothing else, just sent a signal to the marketplace that this is an issue that everybody cares about. It doesn't matter what color you are. Everybody feels like it's time to get involved in a way that I don't think I've seen in my lifetime.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Which that's when I think change actually finally occurs. I hope.
Yeah.
I really hope. How has it affected you personally? Do you have any personal thoughts or?
What's changed is I used to see my role as a citizen, as a father, as a worker, and as an employer of people to kind of keep my head down and focus on the business at hand. That you see so many things going on in the world around you, and you have to choose which one you're going to give your energy to, right? And I think more often than not, I keep a pretty full dance card, and I try not to pay attention to anything that's necessarily in my sphere of influence. And I think what this has done for me a little bit is kind of taken me aback to say, maybe I have to pay more attention to things that I haven't historically had an obligation to pay attention to.
Okay.
But where there's still work to be done. And I think, a lot of people are starting to say something that I believe, which is, we have to get our own house in order. We have to start doing some introspective work and really taking inventory. So for me as an individual, I've been just kind of thinking back on my life, where I grew up, what preconceived notions I have. And, the way I look at it is I don't know anybody that thinks that they're racist. I don't think I'm racist, right? Mm-hmm. But somehow these types of events happen and continue to happen. And I think it's not about the evil people who act out and are just overt and they know it and you know it.
A-holes.
Because right. I think there's a fringe group that might that definitely exists in that way, but that's not the majority. People like me, I think, are more culpable in that we just assumed it really wasn't that big a problem. And we thought that subtle things, unconscious bias, I think, is a huge component of what's coming to the surface, that we've had biases, we've allowed biases to take place. We looked the other way and didn't pay attention to them and let them really rise to the surface. But I feel like what's been unique about George Floyd, at least for me, is when that happened, I became a witness to a murder.
Yeah, dude.
And I know that I've heard about these things, but frankly, since Rodney King, I can't think about any time that it has come to me to actually look closely and say, this actually happened. This is real. And this is representative. It's a symptom of something that's a lot broader that I said, I probably looked the other way. I probably just moved on about my business. It's not that I wished any ill. It's not that I wanted these things to occur. I just don't think I fully acknowledged or appreciated what an issue it is. But now that I am a witness to this, now I think it's incumbent on me to take a deeper look inside myself and go, okay, how do I have any contribution to this, and what am I not? What do I need to look honestly at? And that doesn't mean, we all have to do public confessions, but it's like, I think that I've got my own part to play. And so I'm trying to look at that, and I'm trying to figure out, how does that impact the way I make decisions, the way that I, the way that I use humor, the way I, react when other people use humor around me, what kind of media do I consume? What kinds of things have I been oblivious to or unaware of, but that are contributing to these kinds of things? And so I'm trying to take a harder look at that, and I'm trying to figure out now, how do you take that inventory and actually adapt it to action that's constructive? And so one of the deeper things that I'm observing is kind of along a common theme that I'm seeing in this country, which is there's two big events. What is coronavirus and George Floyd? What do they have in common? And what I'm seeing that is a problem in both of these issues is that two things happened that I think there's a lot that we could agree on as a nation and decide collectively we want to positively influence so that these type of things don't happen in the same way going forward. And yet what I see happening is we get into this finger pointing game, and the Republicans go to their bunker and the Democrats go to their bunker, and they're all lobbing grenades at each other and going, this is your fault. No, this is your fault. And so nobody's really bringing the humility to look inside of themselves. When I say nobody, a lot of people are, but the loudest voices seem to be the ones.
It seems like it happens for 2 split seconds, and then we immediately go
fully
partisan.
Fully partisan.
F
and it's
you,
like,
F you, it's
the world got sick.
Yeah.
The world got sick, and we decided that had something to do with, how
politics.
That's a red or a blue issue. We saw a man get murdered on camera.
Yeah.
He got murdered, and we decided to make that a political issue. And I understand that politics is people, and there is some correlation, but I'd prefer if the correlation only went so far as to say, how are we going to change policy so that we can course correct the reasons that these things are occurring?
It seems like we lose our humanity when it becomes so partisan, and that completely goes out the window.
I totally agree. The world wants things simple. They want things in black and white. They want things in good and bad and right and wrong. And how do you deal with the fact that everybody's wrong?
Yeah.
How do you deal with the fact that everybody is most people are right in some ways as well, right? And so when you start accusing people and saying, well, if you're this, then you are that. On either side, you really do a great service to the influence that you can have. And so I'm trying not to engage in that. And I'm really trying to use, even in my own podcast and with my business, I'm trying to use these events to say, okay, how can we come together and align on a solution and a myriad of solutions so that we can proactively, it's like there's a saying, go hard on the problem, go gentle on the people.
Okay.
Right? The person, if you accuse somebody, they get defensive and you've lost a potential ally. But if you can welcome them in to a cause, you've got people on the right that are paying attention to Black Lives Matter in a way that you didn't have a few years ago. So do you stone them because they weren't there before? Or do you say, hey, look, glad you're here now. Glad to have you. Here's what we can do together.
Yeah,
right?
Let's move forward.
And that's the tragedy of what's going on. And it's something that, for my part, I want to play in the few, little small ecosystem that I play in, I want to try to just make an incremental contribution to that so that we can actually make progress.
Something that's been occurring to me is that I think maybe what you're saying is we simplify everything. The reality is complexity.
Right.
And none of us want to deal with complexity.
No,
complexity
we don't.
sucks. I want to say right and wrong, and that's easy.
Yeah.
So, okay. What has been your response to George Floyd's murder and then the ensuing protests from like a business standpoint? Have you guys shifted what you're doing?
Well, yeah. So I think that here's what we didn't do. We didn't take to Instagram.
Okay.
And
so Oxford Road has an Instagram?
We do.
Okay.
Severely underutilized, always has been. But we do. Look, with LinkedIn and everything.
You're radio, so you're.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, we try to be visible to use these channels: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We try to use these things as a way to demonstrate a lot of the thought leadership work that we do.
Okay. And
so maybe LinkedIn is a better example because we do publish regularly on LinkedIn. And rather than, trying to use a meme or post a statement or a quote or something like that, I think this is a much longer process. And I don't think people necessarily want that. And I think that, for me as...
they don't want the longer process, or they don't want the little short, jabby, immediate stuff?
I think that we all want to do the quick fix.
Right. Yeah.
And this is not a quick fix problem. Yeah. But the problem is I think people are feeling some amount of pressure to respond quickly. And what I'm trying to respond with is conversation and fact finding. Did a little bit to research some of the groups that we could support monetarily. And I think one that we found that was interesting was Campaign Zero. Okay. Which is very focused on policy and very focused on how do you actually make real change through laws that can be passed and regulations that can minimize police brutality. And it's strategic and it's thoughtful and it's specific. So small things like that, but I'm really not trying to make a show of that. I think this is a long-term process.
I agree.
That might start with Black Lives Matter, but we have to look at underrepresented voices across the board and ask ourselves, are we looking out for are we doing our part to be good stewards? And what unconscious biases do we have, and how do we root that out? So we're engaging in a process where we're having internal meetings, discussions. We're looking at what other companies are doing. We're trying to figure out what is our long-term plan and policy going to be, so that as a business we're not contributing to these. Okay. But remember, our business is representing other businesses and their marketing and their communications, specifically within a channel. Now, we don't handle people's Instagram accounts, but it's very, very interesting because so much of what we do is working with personalities who give their opinions for a living. It's that kind of media.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So
your advertisers are going on to podcasts and talk radio and things like that.
So we have clients that are sponsoring the programs and giving ad copy to be read by hosts that include Ben Shapiro and include Rachel Maddow's podcast.
So both ends of the spectrum.
Both ends of the spectrum, yeah. But it's hard because you've got people that are angry and you've got people that are very vocal right now, and you've got a lot of finger pointing going on saying, well, how can you be in association with this voice that has, ignored this issue or is wrong about this issue? Or usually they don't say it like that. Usually it's an accusation or a label that they slap on somebody. And I see people on both sides actually going, oh, you support Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter gives money to X, Y, and Z, and therefore we're not going to do business with you anymore. Or they say, oh, yeah, but you also sponsor this conservative program, and so we're not going to give you money anymore for that. Or, we're going to call you out, so you're part of the problem. And so it's like I've seen a lot of advertisers, a lot of brands that come out and they go, okay, hey, we're gonna post a thing on Instagram, we're gonna give a donation to the NAACP or whatever cause they feel is going to be most constructive in this, and then they get hammered from both sides. Oh, wow. They get accused from both sides. Yeah. So it's becoming very complex, increasingly so. And we've had these problems, and they flare up. It can be as simple as they flare up every time you get an advertiser on Fox News and Tucker Carlson says something that, upsets a big group of people.
Pissed a few people
He's
off
a lightning
lately.
rod, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you find brands that are getting stuck in the if-then trap. If you promote your brand against this program, then therefore you are a proponent of hate speech. You are a racist. You are advancing racism.
There's no middle ground left.
No. Huh. And I think one of the things that I'm starting to hear just in my private conversations is that we have a shortage of real leadership right now that are able to come together and say,
leadership in what sense?
Who is the Martin Luther King of our generation that we can look at that has a vision that isn't predicated on throwing stones, but is there to unite people.
A solution.
Yeah,
that's what I don't see.
Yeah, so people that can unite people behind solutions and being constructive. And right now you've got a lot of people that are really good at throwing stones, but you don't have a lot of uniting forces. And so it's very, very hard for people to know where to turn and how to navigate these things. Because on one side, I think most people are conscious that they have an impact, whether it's a few people or millions of customers, in the marketplace. And they're trying to take inventory of themselves, but they're not really being given the space to take that inventory and to proact. They're being accused of being too much this or too much that, no matter what step they take. And it's very, very destructive. So, for my business, in our own limited way, we're trying to take measures to remove some of these biases and to present opportunities for anybody that we transact with in more effective ways than maybe we have in the past. Because I think we're becoming more conscious. But the challenge that we're having in advising some of the clients that we partner with is that they're up against so much pressure that isn't based on what do you think the right thing to do is and letting them decide. It's who's throwing the biggest rock at you the hardest, the soonest, and trying to figure out how you dodge that rock.
They're making fear-based choices.
Correct. And I don't feel like that's constructive.
No, I don't think long-term it is.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to coronavirus real quick, and then we'll hit this other stuff.
Sure.
So you're a small business owner. Roughly how many employees do you guys have?
We're about 40.
40. Okay. Have you lost any employees since this began? Fired anybody?
No, we've been fortunate in that we've been able to hold steady.
Okay. So how has the coronavirus affected you guys as a business?
Yeah. So what we saw happen, it was interesting. I was in Israel from March 1st through 12th.
Oh, dude, good timing.
Yeah. We were at the Western Wall the morning of the 11th.
Oh, no.
And Israel basically said, thanks for coming.
Get out.
It's great to see you.
Oh, no way.
We loved having you here.
Go home.
You've been great company. Yeah, you can. We're going to go ahead and get you on a plane now. So,
that's great.
So I came home and I was like, I was trying to stay unplugged.
Dude.
But the world was coming apart.
I was in Las Vegas working 15 days in a row, came home on the 14th, woke up the 15th, and it was like, oh, it's over. Okay.
So came home on a Thursday night,
Dude.
No real time for, or maybe it was Wednesday night, but no time for jet lag. It was like, had a day to take inventory, figure out how we're going to operate and create quick internal policy on how to manage remote workforce. And then it's like everybody out.
Really?
Send everybody home within 24 hours.
So the Friday, the 14th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, had everybody
Okay.
go home by about 11 a.m. on Friday.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so Thursday, so I had a day to take inventory.
Damn.
And figure out our plan and then make the announcement. And by the way, they had told me, don't come back to the office because we need you quarantining regardless. Nobody knew that everybody was going to leave. It was like I had been traveling internationally. So I'm here at my house. So
you never went back to the office
never went
after
back
you got
the
back
office.
from Israel?
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting experience. And what I saw happen immediately was every business found themselves on a spectrum between being essential and non-essential.
Yes. Yeah.
In a way that we had never really been classified before because we've had a good market and we're not really paying attention to, do I need this?
Yeah.
It's more like, do I want this?
Yeah.
And then the question became, well, do I need this? And so also you had these, projections of, how many lives were going to be lost and how many people were suffering. And what I saw brands doing is trying to figure out, is this even a time that we should be advertising? Mm-hmm. Are we being insensitive by advertising right now? We were fortunate economically in that most of the brands that we work with are direct to consumer. They're not dependent on retail.
Okay.
And so they actually had an advantage in this marketplace because people that could have gone to the mall and picked something up, now they need an online solution.
Well, like I'm going to go talk to Lucinda at Moink. And so she's one of your clients where I know her business is like quadrupled or something.
Yeah, off the charts. Yeah. And so we had a couple things, any adverse impact that occurred in our clients' businesses was either they ran out of supply, they ran out of product.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or B, they felt that if they promoted their product right now and it was anything less than like must-have essentials, they felt like it was in poor taste. And, immediately, I think I had the weekend to try to get a game plan together. And I thought, well, we don't want to be tone deaf right now. And then all of a sudden everybody starts, and they didn't know I said it. I'm just like, I think we all had the same thought at the same time. It's like tone deaf. And the tone deaf police came out. And so everybody.
Well, I got a couple of emails that first week from a couple of people that buy, and I was like, you a-holes.
Yeah.
Now is not the time.
Now's not the time. Why are you pitching me right now? This is not a day to pitch.
I don't want to buy you shit right now, man.
So what do? We all go right, and we go, okay, now we're so woke. We're so not tone deaf that it's like in these unprecidented times.
Now it's too far to the other side.
Now it's too far to the other side. It's like, come on, at some point, what my thesis was that we have a part to play because we realized we needed to flatten the curve in the health crisis so we didn't collapse the infrastructure. But we had another curve to flatten, and that was the economic curve. And my thesis was that if everybody cowers right now, because we saw a lot of the venture capital community, a lot of people started telling their portfolio clients like, hey, look, it's time to hunker down. It's time to, just go.
Worst case scenario.
Everybody's, worst case scenario. And if the whole world does that, I mean, so much of the economy is dependent on confidence and optimism and people being ready to still take risks. And so, but fear spreads.
Yeah. And
when the fear spreads, you actually have a self-fulfilling prophecy of things getting worse and more jobs being lost because people are, if you're in the middle, it's not about like a lot of people just got taken out of the game. They can't do anything about that except try to adapt.
Right.
In creative ways, like you're a great example of, right? You figured out a way you can pivot.
Barbecue, baby.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, you saw a lot of that, good old fashioned American ingenuity.
I saw a bunch of friends. Yeah.
Right?
And that's why I wanted to do this.
And that's the best you can do in that situation if your industry gets leveled. And then you had some people that are, selling toilet paper or, something that everybody wants, right? And all they have to do is keep up with it.
Yeah.
But there were all these businesses in the middle that had an opportunity to be successful and to continue to advance their business that were paralyzed by fear. And so my position became to try to do what little bit I could to encourage some of those businesses that were in the middle to make the choice that, hey, it's awkward right now, Let's find a way to talk about it in a way that is mindful and sensitive of the hardships people are experiencing. But let's continue to take steps forward. And, to kind of bring it all back around, I think that that's one of the things we're learning in 2020 is that things are getting real uncomfortable outside of our control, and the gut reaction is flight, right? Your instinct is to flee the situation. The other instinct is to pick a fight.
Yep.
And people are doing one of those two things in both situations. And we're human beings. We have great capacity to choose not to flee and not to fight, but rather to unite and try to figure out, okay, what's going on? What do people need? And how do we become part of the solution without holding other people back?
Right.
And I think that's getting lost in the mix. And so that's where I'm coming from. And, we're not we're not Amazon. We're not a conglomerate, but in our own little sphere, in our own little way, we're just trying to, have a little bit of humility to look inside and go, how have we contributed in negative ways or not done enough? And what can we do that's redemptive, that can help people and in the process bring people together rather than just pushing apart and pointing fingers.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time. Dan's a busy man. What do you think the future will look like?
Yeah. So, yeah.
I think you got about a minute and a half.
Yeah, no, it's great. Let's do it. Okay, so utopia for sure.
Okay,
Harmony.
good. Everything will be fixed.
Or civil war, whatever, somewhere in between the two, right? No, I think, look, number one, we don't know. Nobody knows. Anybody who thinks they know is wrong. But I'll throw some theories out there for posterity so we can look back in a time capsule and say we were wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
How wrong I was. But from COVID, a few things. One, I think that we're going to be a little bit better prepared for these types of things to happen. I think we all advanced technologically. By a few years, I think that everybody was already moving toward digital. Forward. Yeah. Everybody was already on this track.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I saw a stat that U.S. retail sales was 15% e-commerce, and it jumped to 25.
Okay.
Right in the space of a couple of months. And so what that means is you have people that were going to live the rest of their lives never using Zoom, that are now Zoom masters, and Slack and
death
tools
of
like
retail
that.
As far as brick and mortar, right?
And look, that's going to come back a little bit, but it'll be different.
Okay.
And there's always going to be a both and. I think we live in they thought paper was going to go away, and there's more paper printed than ever, or so I've heard. So I do think that things don't die as far as the way we engage with technology, but it's definitely different. I think one of my fears is that we're not going to look out for a virus that can shut down our technology. Because if we don't prepare for that kind of virus, how are we going to deal with something like COVID, where we found we were very elastic in our ability to go and do a lot of different thought work in other places, right? How does that shift? So I think that's a piece of it. And I think we'll be more ready for those scenarios because we saw that this is real. But I do worry that this was only a test, right?
That's what I feel.
Yeah. With George Floyd, I think 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That's America, right? And I think that we go through these periods where we go from paying attention to going to sleep and paying attention and going to sleep. And I think this woke us up for a minute. We've got a window here, and I think we're going to make some gains. And I think there's going to be a lot of collateral damage, which, I'm hoping to do my part in minimizing in my sphere. But I think that I do think that we will definitely take steps forward so that we can keep the promises of this country. This country makes a lot of promises that I think that I still believe in. I still believe in America. I still believe in the hope that it represents. But it happened to be set up by a bunch of human beings with a lot of self-interest in mind, and then stewarded by a bunch of human beings with a lot of self-interest in mind. And you have people on both sides with self-interest in mind now. And so we ain't going to fix it. We're not going to fix it, but I think we'll do a little better. And I believe that we're on the precipice of taking another step forward. And I hope that, I hope we don't take too many steps backwards in the process and create new problems while we're solving the ones that we're now seeing. Yeah.
All right, we're out of time. Dan, thank you for your time. What's your podcast?
It's called Oxford Road Presents Media's New Deal, although we're going to shift the Media's New Deal piece of this.
Okay.
And we're going to start pivoting for the rest of the year to help marketers really hear different perspectives on how do you market toward a divided nation.
Okay.
And how do we be part of the solution in that?
Oh, interesting.
So,
I love this,
so if you look for Oxford Road Presents, that's the way to do it.
Oxford Road Presents on
everywhere you get your shows.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate
Thank you, Grant.
Chicken Man out, episode 7 or 8, something like that, guys. Thanks a lot.